Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. So we're continuing our discussion about touch points between Karate Kata and Aikido techniques. And I want to start off by talking about in Aikido, Aikijujitsu, and a lot of the older arts, there's a lot of techniques where we defend against a grab of a wrist. So a lot of times Gendai Budo or modern Budo will question why there's so much grabbing of the wrist. People will come out and say, in sports that are combative sports, such as UFC style fighting, you don't see a whole lot of wrist grabs. And my understanding of this is, usually if I have a weapon, and say I were to try to use this weapon against Boyd, he has an incentive to keep me from getting my weapon out. So if I go to grab my weapon, now he's grabbed my wrist, okay? So now I have to do some sort of a technique whereby I'm countering his grab, and now I can do some technique along these lines, right? So I think that's why in the older systems, you have a lot of techniques that defend against wrist grab. So again, if you grab, let's do a cross grab on this one, right? So this one here looks like a classic number 2 control, right? Or a gooseneck or whatever you want to call it. I'm just setting this up from here, and I'm using the hilt of my sword to come in, and now we have this sort of a technique, and I can continue through the cut. So that's why I think people grab it. In modern martial arts, a lot of police officers, I did a training camp with Casey Kakaisen Sensei, who is a Aikido and Judo Sensei, but he's also a Moundsview police officer, and he does training for his fellow officers. And there's quite a lot of defense against trying to grab the weapon, and it incorporates a lot of this. If we're just fighting, you don't have a whole lot of incentive to grab my wrist, right? Unless maybe I grab you down there. Now we have a reason to grab the wrist. So there's a way to create an incentive. If I grab your throat, right, now maybe there's a reason to grab the wrist. So there are ways to set this up. But it goes on to discuss about, so if it's infrequent and we have to sort of set up an artificial situation to get someone to grab your wrist, why would you spend a lot of time on class on it? Why not work on more common techniques? And there's some validity to that argument, but I'll counter that by saying, once you start to learn the dynamics of how the body works and how this comes in here. So first time I just cranked. Second time I connected my palm down, right? And you can learn that by working these techniques with each other. You can't learn that if you don't, right? So what I wanted to talk about is in Wansu, there's a movement here where you grab, and it doesn't matter which hand you do. So I'm gonna step out to the side. Now if I come here, I'll do a number 2 control. If you grab with the other hand, and I break your center line, now I'm gonna come out here. And this creates kind of a Kotegaeshi, right? So a kote is this part of the hand. A lot of people say wrist. Wrist is actually te-kubi. When you're doing kendo or kenjutsu, the armor that you wear from here to here is called the kote. And when you take the kote and you return it, because you're being nice and you're giving it back to him, right? It breaks his stance. So at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Suresh Sensei to talk about Kotegaeshi from an Aikido standpoint, because it's a little bit more refined than the karate I understand.
So, thank you, Sensei. So for Aikido purposes, Kotegaeshi, actually almost all the locks that we practice in Aikido, they're premised on breaking balance for uke, and the state being in a strong, calm, and relaxed position. So, Bowie, if you come closer a bit. Even if Bowie just gives me his hand, it's a hypothetical, it's a learning situation. Even if he gives me his hand, and let's say I'm in a good position, but look at his body structure. He's perfectly balanced, he's perfectly stable. If he's strong, no matter how much I try and crank it, it will only be pain compliance. And it's a bit difficult to see. Let's use the other hand. Sorry, let's use the other hand. So even if he's strong and straight, if I try and crank it, and I try and engage my shoulder, my bicep, and my forearm to try and create pain compliance, you can see how far away my hand gets away from his. The point of contact actually it results in just 2 fingers only, where I have my fulcrum, and then I have my force, where I'm trying to create a lock from my locked up shoulder. That in itself is highly ineffective. For Aikido purposes, in Shodokan, we want to use the whole body and we want to avoid grabbing and trying to create the lock. Okay? What that means is, I want to just hold softly, and by the time Bowie actually realizes what's going on, that's where the lock actually comes in, and the lock should be in full contact with his body. This way I can use this large space over here to use my body weight and adjust as necessary. Now, just before I hand off, the Kotegaeshi is usually a nage, it's usually a throw, but it can be a efficient lock. If his body balance is straight, if his body balance is nice and clear, it's very difficult for me to make this work. There must be a technique or any form of distraction that creates some sort of disruption in his balance. Once the disruption is there, then it becomes very easy. Stand up. It becomes very easy to control. And you maintain control of the situation, holding onto the lock, using the full contact of your body on the uke continually until it's time for you to let go.
Do you want to show just a nage as well?
Yes.
So I'll be your uke. We won't just beat up on Bowie. So Shomenski. Not the most graceful fall, but we got it in there. Okay, Bowie. Thanks for stopping by. If you like this kind of stuff, we'll be putting out content. I like to look at different parts. So again, this was from Wansu. This movement in here, and then it goes on. So again, here and that movement. So it's from Wansu Kata, a little bit of a shift to the side, and the Geidan Barai can become a Kotegaeshi lock or a throw. Thanks.